Being here today. Today I will talk about Stephen King's book On Writing and Memoir of the Craft. If some of you don't know who King is, he is the author of over 50 books, including the novels The Shining, It, and Pet Sematary. King doesn't always write horror fiction, but he has gotten a reputation over the years as a writer of those scary books. Why did I pick King's memoir to talk about? I'm a big Stephen King fan. I have read 33 of his novels so far. I can't say I love them all, but I have enjoyed most of them. And just in case you're wondering, the answer is yes. After reading those scary novels by King, I had to sleep with the lights on. King's book, On Writing and Memoir of the Craft, is divided up into two sections. The first part of the book is his memoir, and the second part is his advice on writing. I have read this book twice, and I didn't mind going back a third time to do a presentation on it. First, I will talk briefly about the memoir part of the book, then I will talk briefly about the second half, and finally, I will give my thoughts on the book. With that said, let's get started. The memoir part of the book is a collection of short stories from King's life, from when he was a young child all the way to when he became an alcoholic during his career. One of the first stories King talks about in his book was when his father abandoned the family. King was 2 years old, his brother David was only 4. His dad told his mother he was going out for a pack of cigarettes and he never came home. King goes on to talk about when the first idea for a story came to him, how his poor mother had to work long hours to make ends meet, and how he went through a lot of babysitters. Only one babysitter stands out in King's memory, Ulla Beulah. According to King on page 20, Ulla Beulah was prone to farts, the kind that were both loud and smelly. Sometimes when she was so afflicted, she would throw me on the couch, drop her wool-skidded butt on my face, and let loose. Ulla Beulah's gassy reign came to an end when King's mother came home from work to find little Stephen locked in the closet and the babysitter was taking a nap on the couch. King also talked about other stories of his life, like the first television his mom bought in 1958, the first story he submitted to a magazine in 1960, and how he met his wife, Tabitha, in the summer of 1969 at the University of Maine, and there are many other stories in between. One of the things King noticed about his wife on the first day they met was how much she swore. According to King, on page 61, she swore like a mill worker instead of a co-ed. Having been a mill worker, I was qualified to judge. Her name was Tabitha Spruce. We got married a year and a half later, and the rest is history. King talked briefly about his alcohol addiction and how it got so bad he couldn't remember writing his novel Cujo. On page 99, he said, "At the worst of it, I no longer wanted to drink and I no longer wanted to be sober either. I felt evicted from life." King didn't talk about it in the book, but his wife Tabitha helped him recover from that dark time in his life. I have heard him tell the story multiple times in different interviews, and it's thanks to her that he recovered and went on to write many more novels. Now that I've talked briefly about the memoir part of the book, I will talk briefly about the second half. In the second half of the book, King gives advice on writing. He talked about how you should always listen to your editor, the importance of revising your work, and vocabulary. King said to write what you mean. On page 117, King said, Make yourself a solemn promise right now that you never use emolument when you mean tip, and you'll never say, John stopped long enough to perform an act of excretion when you mean John stopped long enough to take a shit. Out of all the advice King gave on writing, the most important was if you want to be a writer, you need to read a lot. King said on page 145, if you want to be a writer, you must do two things above all others: read a lot and write a lot. There's no way around these two things that I'm aware of, no shortcuts. King also said on page 147, If I had a nickel for every person who ever told me he or she wanted to become a writer but didn't have time to read, I could buy myself a pretty good steak dinner. Can I be blunt on this subject? If you don't have time to read, you don't have time to write. Simple as that. There's more helpful advice King gives in this book. Sadly, I don't have time to talk about them. But you can always buy the book or buy the audiobook, and the audiobook is narrated by Stephen King himself. Now that I have talked briefly about the first part and the second part of the book, I will tell you my thoughts. Being a fan of Stephen King, I love this book. It was nice learning about my favorite author, from the gassy babysitter farting on his face to when he met his wife, and all the other stories I didn't get to talk about. What I learned from reading King's memoir is that he is just like anyone else, with a life filled with love and losses. Anyone can be a writer. All you need is passion and dedication. I also enjoyed the second half of the book. Wanting to be a writer, I found it helpful and encouraging. I would highly recommend this book to anyone who wants to be a writer or enjoys reading memoirs. On a scale from 1 red balloon to 5 red balloons, I give it 5 red balloons. Maybe if I never read a King novel before, I would give this book only 4 balloons. But I'm a King fan, so 5 red balloons it is. Today, I have talked briefly about On Writing and Memoir of the Craft. I hope you have enjoyed this presentation. Before I go, I would like to leave you with a Stephen King quote. Just remember that Dumbo didn't need the feather. The magic was in him.